and we're going to hear reports. The first one from Iliam Burbano, who is with Labor for Palestine.
Good evening to everybody. Very happy to be here with these other great activists that were with us at the World Social Forum. I'm here on behalf of Labor for Palestine Toronto. I was also very active for a long time around Palestine Solidarity Organizing in QP, Ontario. I'm no longer a QP member, but still actively involved in Labor for Palestine. I just want to share some general observations and some specific ones about the role or the participation of the labor movement at the World Social Forum and labor activists, both from Canada, Latin America, and South Africa specifically. For me, overall, one of the things that was very, very encouraging, very, very inspiring was to have a first-hand look at the global scope of this movement. My entry point to this movement was here in Toronto in 2006 in QP, Ontario, as an ally of the Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid, and now as a member of Labor for Palestine Toronto, that is a committee of Kaya. But to be in Porto Alegre and to see that this movement, it is truly, I mean, Yafa mentioned that it's diverse and there's different sectors, but it is a global and growing and dynamic and very, very strong movement, and it's improving in its coordination in terms of its vision and how it's going to move forward. Also, the participation of Palestinians who are leading this movement was a very, very important aspect for me personally, and also obviously politically. There was Palestinians there from the West Bank, from Gaza, from 48, as well as from refugees from the diaspora, and there was a good representation of Palestinian youth. There was a united youth delegation, and this was really, really important because Palestinians, because of the history, because of occupation, because of colonization, because of apartheid, obviously don't have freedom of movement. And I met a brother who represented the Union of Agricultural Work Committees in Gaza, who, like other delegates, had just a week before endured the Israeli bombing and had to leave his family and his comrades behind. And it took him 20 days to travel to Porto Alegre. He was admitted into Egypt only for 72 hours. He had to leave quickly after that. And the only reason he was admitted into Egypt was because he was granted a Brazilian tourist visa. So the Palestinian presence, leadership in the World Social Forum, I think is a testament to the resilience of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian movement, despite all the obstacles that are put in place for them not to exercise their self-determination and to move freely and to organize in the different parts of the world. I want to mention some specific points around the Latin American context. There was really good participation from Latin America, not only Brazil, activists from Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Venezuela, Cuba, Ecuador, and Colombia. And I highlight the Latin American participation because something that I learned that I didn't know is that Israel is active in making inroads into the region's markets for its weapons, security, and surveillance-related technology exports. And according to the Boycott National Committee reps that were at the World Social Forum, Brazil is viewed by Israel as the entry point into Latin America for military security surveillance-related exports. The Brazilian government recently signed a major security and military cooperation agreement with Israel and has established for many years numerous contracts with Israeli companies related to policing, crowd control, surveillance systems, military arms, prisons, which was already mentioned, militarized borders. The Argentinian government also has a contract worth $40 million with Israeli military industries to set up a prison. And this trade is growing, and it's going to be further expanded by a free trade agreement that was signed in 2010 and then fully ratified in 2011 between Israel and the Mercosur bloc countries, which is Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil. And this is the first FTA that the Mercosur bloc countries have signed with a country outside the region. So Israel is, and the Israeli military and weapons industry is well placed to keep penetrating into Latin America. and as a result, the BDS movement emerging out of that region is really, really important. There was visible labor movement participation at the World Social Forum. There was also some challenges. Brazil's largest union federation, the Unified Workers Central CUT, and the second largest federation, the General Confederation of Workers, CGT, actively supported and participated in the forum. And there is a political space in the Brazilian labor movement to have a discussion, to have a debate, to do solidarity work around Palestine, which would be a contrast to our situation in the labor movement here in Canada, where that space would not be available within the CLC, Canadian Labour Congress, or even amongst most of our national unions, except the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. The Argentinian Trade Union Federation, the CTA, sent its international relations officer, and he was very active, very supportive, and there's space there in the labor movement to move solidarity with Palestine forward. I think probably, at least from my perspective, the most significant or the most powerful involvement of labor activists was the South African National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union, HAWU. Their deputy secretary treasurer was there, Suraya Jawuddin, and she was very vocal, very active, sharing a very grounded analysis of apartheid, linked to their historical experience fighting apartheid in South Africa, but also talking about how the movement, the BDS movement, is advancing in South Africa, both at the civil society level and in the labor movement, and I'll speak a little more about that afterwards. From Canada and the US, it was mostly rank and file and some retired union activists that were there, not officially representing unions. I was there even though I was a QP member at the time. I was there in support. I was a member of Labour for Palestine, and the Canadian Union of Postal Workers was the only official Canadian union delegation. So I'll just mention, I got 2 minutes left, so some of the challenges that were important. Because the centralized Brazilian Trade Union Federation, CUT, has such a close relationship with the Brazilian Workers' Party government, what became apparent is that although there's space for solidarity with the Palestinian struggle, they're very reluctant to criticize the deepening commercial link, especially in security matters, between Brazil and Israel. And also, the BDS movement in Brazil is fairly new. It was launched at the civil society level in 2011. Despite these barriers, there was a lot of union, rank and file Brazilian and community activists that were very open about pushing the CUT, that it needed to take a more proactive stance in pressuring the Brazilian government to cut these growing commercial ties with the Israeli government. Something else just to mention, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers was subject to a smear campaign while we were at the World Social Forum, mainly by Sun Media, also supported by Benia Brett. And basically, this was linked to the whole campaign to push for Bill 377. And basically the attack was that CUPW was attending an anti-Semitic gathering that supported terrorism, and they were using taxpayers' money to send their members to this event. And that's why Bill 377 needed to be passed, so that there was more accountability, so that we know where unions are putting their money. That bill, by the way, now passed. Maybe just some important successes that happened that didn't happen at the World Social Forum itself, and I'll finish with this. While we were at the World Social Forum, the Public Service International Congress took place in Durban, South Africa. This is one of the largest international trade unions. It represents about 20 million workers, including various Canadian public sector unions. And NAHAWU and the South African Municipal Workers Union, members of COSATU, put forth a BDS resolution at the PSI Congress. The PSI leadership tried to block it on procedural grounds, then tried to water this BDS resolution. These South African unions held their ground. They actually had to organize a rally outside the hotel where the Congress was happening to force the vote. And the vote did happen. The motion wasn't watered down. It passed by a small majority because of all the machinations that the bureaucracy and the leadership were doing behind the scenes. but the motion passed, and now the Public Service International supports the BDS movement, and also it also will support the campaign to support the educational campaign around Israeli Apartheid Week. And QP is a member of PSI, PSAC, Public Service Alliance of Canada, as well as NUPG, National Union of, it's a federal union, a government union. It's not to say that PSI is going to suddenly lead the BDS movement and Palestine solidarity work, but it's showing us that even in these very controlled and bureaucratic international labor spaces, the space is opening up for the BDS campaign, and the South African unions were the ones that played a leading role in making that advancement. Thank you.
Good.
Hi everybody, my name is Natalie Kouri-Towe. I'm a member of Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, and I was sent down to Porto Alegre to be part of the Queer Visions delegation, along with John Grayson, who provided us with this fantastic footage from the General Assembly. And I also have like some stickers that were made with a website called pinkwatchingisrael.com. And I have some stickers here. I don't have a ton, but if you go to that website, there is some video footage and information from the Queer Visions group that met, that you can watch videos and footage of that, including panels that were hosted as part of the World Social Forum, and one of them includes Angela Davis. So that's really exciting. It was the highlight of my life. The Queer Visions delegation is a pretty historically significant moment for queer solidarity activism in the Palestine Solidarity Movement and Palestine Liberation Movement. This is the first gathering of international queer activists to meet together and strategize and talk about the work that we're doing both in our local contexts and our solidarity work with the Palestinian movement as well as with queer Palestinian groups. So the Queer Visions group was organized by Pink Watching Israel, which is primarily a kind of network website, and the Palestinian Queers for Boycott, Divestment and Sanction organization based in Palestine. So the group was made up of about 18 people from across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. And some of us were part of groups already. For example, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid here in Toronto. There was a very new Queers Against Israeli Apartheid Vancouver group that started up, and there's a couple people who came down from there, as well as people from organizations in New York, Queeristan in Amsterdam, and then members of Palestinian Queers for Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, PQBDS. And part of what we did was spent the first day and a half before the World Social Forum even began in workshop meetings all day long, sharing the organizing that we're doing and the struggles that we're working on, and building a framework for concerted campaigns. And one of the main things that we identified and talked about is the importance of focusing our struggle of solidarity through a tackling and debunking of the pinkwashing campaign of the Israeli state. So for those of you who have not really heard much about it, pinkwashing is generally used now to talk about the Israeli state's mobilization and use of gay rights discourses. So like using the fact that the language that they use is that, you know, Israel is an oasis for gay rights in the homophobic Middle East. And that this is a tactic that the state uses in order to divert attention away from its violation of Palestinian human rights and to trade over gay rights for human rights more generally. And so this tactic is something that queer activists have been trying to fight in places like Toronto. The work that Queers Against Israeli Apartheid does has been trying to focus on some of that. And the thing that's been exciting is actually at the forum, having conversations about the different ways in which pinkwashing is functioning within the local context of the different places that different activists were working in, and also how useful focusing on anti-pinkwashing campaigns could bring people in, bring new groups in, and new communities into the BDS movement. So the opportunity to have that that space to network, that space to connect and share struggle, and to build frameworks for building international campaigns, I think is really fantastic. And there's going to be a lot of interesting organizing that will be happening along the queer front of anti-pinkwashing campaigns in the next year at least, and in the coming years as well. And I think one of the other things that was really interesting about the Queer Visions group at the World Social Forum was the incredible reception that we had in the movement. And we consistently had really fantastic attendance at our talks, at the panels that we hosted. There was one that was looking at the role of pinkwashing in the Zionist project, and then another one on queer BDS and the kind of challenges and struggles of BDS organizing from a queer framework. And those spaces, those workshops became really fantastic ways also to connect some of the queer struggles and the work that we were beginning to build with people from other movements who were able to attend. And I really encourage people to check out the website and see the videos from those panels, because they were pretty incredible moments. And then the last thing I wanted to say was to do a little bit of a pitch for Quaya. We've got a couple of fun activities happening in the coming months, including we're helping to organize a panel with Saya at Israeli Apartheid Week. And we're really looking forward to it. We're bringing activists from Lebanon and a Palestinian activist who's part of Palestinian Queers for Boycott, Divestment and Sanction, who lives in Amsterdam, to do a tour, to come to Canada as part of a tour. And this is going to be a really amazing event. We're also partnering with Images Festival on a screening of Barbara Hammer's piece that reflects, so she's like a video artist, really famous queer video artist. And she went as part of a delegation to Palestine and did this video project. So like, we're trying to kind of connect to other spaces and other groups that are organizing. So in the future, please come out to Quaya events. We'll have more information on our website. We're also fundraising, if any of you feel generous and want to help support the work we're doing. I know it's a horrible pitch, but it's a captive audience. And and if you have questions about the queer organizing and the work that the Queer Visions group was doing and the other types of anti-pinkwashing organizing that's happening, please feel free to ask me questions during the Q&A or like send Quaya an email.
Jewish Anti-Zionist Network.
Hi, how y'all doing? Can you hear me? I guess I have to hold this. I went to the World Social Forum because Natalie convinced me that I should go, even though I was tired. I went as part of, and I'm less tired now, but I went as part of a US-Canada joint struggle delegation. So I want to talk to you about a dance, the intimate waltz between joint struggle and solidarity. So what is solidarity and what is it not? How do our struggles connect, which many of us have been talking about, and how do we organize along those lines? Those were among the questions and the purpose behind this delegation that I joined in traveling there to Porto Alegre, which is the site of the first World Social Forum in 2001, so it is significant that the World Social Forum Free Palestine took place in Porto Alegre. The US-Canada Joint Struggle Delegation began organizing last March, and the idea and primary purpose was to build a broad-based cross-movement group of people representing the spectrum of struggles in both Canada and the United States. In all, we were about 25 delegates, including some of the folks from Quaya, Vancouver, united in the view that the movement for Palestinian liberation is critical not only to Palestinians, but also because it exposes the collaboration of the Canadian, US, and other Western governments with Israel and Zionist institutions and organizations. The global arms trade, militarized borders, perpetual war, mass incarceration, destruction of the environment, resource extraction and exploitation, land appropriation and privatization are among the many issues that have profound implications for communities in Palestine, Canada, the US, and all over the world. Therefore, one of the purposes behind our delegation was to strengthen existing ties between communities and struggles, as well as expand them, to develop relationships and networks for continuing this work, and finally, to challenge the Canadian and US government support for Israel, and more importantly, to confront Zionism. We also strove to create a delegation that would reflect the diversity of the movements and peoples involved in the delegation. Now, before I go into some details about workshops and presentations that the delegation participated in, I want to share how we as a delegation defined loosely both solidarity and joint struggle. So solidarity is not charity, and it's not an act spurred by pity. No, solidarity is standing next to people, saying that this is also my struggle, though I experience it differently because of my identity, location, and relationship to power. Joint struggle builds on this premise of solidarity precisely because we see the links in this increasingly globalized world, and we understand that while our immediate needs and interests may differ, we are part of the same struggle. Parallels can be seen and have been mentioned, for instance, in the hunger strikes ongoing of Palestinian prisoners, those of prisoners in California that began in Pelican Bay, the prisoner uprising in the US state of Georgia, and the current hunger strike of Chief Spence of Attawapiskat. Nevertheless, in order to have joint struggle, we have to carefully build meaningful relationships between grassroots organizations in Canada and the US, and those in Palestine and the broader region, as well as the global South. This takes time and discomfort and a willingness to have those difficult discussions. At the World Social Forum Free Palestine, as mentioned, there were over 125 different workshops. I passed around the thing, you can have a look at it. One of the things that also made it difficult, I think, as well as having to travel from place to place when you have back-to-back workshops organized that start right after one another, and yet you're still trying to figure out where exactly you're going in a city you don't know, is that we were hoping as a delegation that there would be simultaneous translation. And the only day that it happened was on the last day at the final session for social movements. This made it so that a lot of the Brazilians didn't attend certain workshops because there wasn't translation. Some of us were only speaking in English. And I think that also served to keep some of us apart, where we could have been actually having more interaction between each other. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So among the over 125 or 150, I didn't count workshops, the Joint Struggle Delegation organized 8. Among them, settler colonialism, apartheid and racism, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim racism and the intensification of repression, labor in Palestine, gender and resistance, challenging colonial feminisms and crafting solidarity with Palestinian women, and the transnational struggle against Israel's worldwide role in repression. My participation in the Joint Struggle Delegation came through my involvement as a member of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, or IJAN. 4 of us from IJAN, representing Argentina, Canada, and the US, and partners from the Malcolm X grassroots movement and the Arab and Muslims, Ethnicities, and Diasporas initiative, presented a workshop on the case of Jews against Zionism. IJAN members each discussed the context in which we work, what we see as our roles, and what kind of work this entails. Points were made that the way in which Israel defines Jewish is based on political convenience, that Zionism is an international system, and that Israel is a military with a state, rather than a state with a military. And our goal is to do anti-Zionist work, not to be anti-Zionists. Responses from the Malcolm X grassroots movement, Gesundheit, and the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diasporas Initiative, and workshop participants included pointing out the tension between Jewish anti-Zionism and Jewish identity politics. Questions of race within IJAN, specifically the overabundance of Ashkenazi Jews, and that inside of Zionism, a deeply racist theory, there is no difference between the left and right when you get down to it. Another workshop, The Transnational Struggle Against Israel's Worldwide Role in Repression, combined both presentations and testimony. Israel's expertise, which has been mentioned by numerous speakers here, in the warehousing of populations, surveillance and military occupation, along with its export of arms and security systems, were discussed. People from different regions then detailed the role in which Zionist organizations, and by extension Israel, played in concert with repressive forces in their communities. It is important to note that Israel tests its weapons and these systems of repression on a captive Palestinian population and then exports them. Also discussed was the key role of G4S, the largest security system in the world, who work hand in hand with the Israeli occupation and dispossession of Palestine and Palestinians. IJAN released a new 28-page booklet, Israel's Role in Worldwide Repression, at the forum. And these copies are $2 each if you're interested, hot off the press. That's to defray printing, and if you don't have the $2 and you really want it, you can have it. Also present at the World Social Forum were different chapters and individuals involved in the Stop the JNF campaign. The Jewish National Fund, or JNF, is a foundational part of Zionism and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Representatives were there from South Africa, Germany, Scotland, Ireland, the US, and Canada. We met in a workshop organized by the Stop the JNF campaign and the Badil Resource Center for Residency and Refugee Rights, and we discussed our different activities in our respective locales and the dynamic of organizing against the JNF and potential strategies for building the campaign. Another workshop was Fighting Environmental Injustices, Land Grabs, and Resource Theft in Palestine and Beyond, organized by Stop the JNF, the East Michigan Environmental Action Council, the Joint Struggle Delegation, and LifeSource, a grassroots Palestinian collective working in Palestine and internationally to build a movement for Palestinian water rights. The purpose of the workshop was to discuss how, under the guise of environmentalism, people, their land, and ways of life are destroyed. Different campaigns to combat environmental racism from Detroit to Palestine were spoken about, and new alliances and relationships were built. For instance, soon the representative from LifeSource will be visiting Detroit soon for a joint presentation about water and the rights of people living in their cities. On many levels, the World Social Forum was successful, but as mentioned, not without its problems. I think that's been talked about plenty, so what I want to say is that the delegation that we formed in an interest of building closer ties between activists on both sides of the 49th parallel, or in this case, we're north of the 43rd or the 44th, I think, and just to build a network. We're not going to continue meeting as a delegation, but we've made a lot of us work together in different groupings, but we've made stronger ties, and it was really important to be there and to see activists from all over the world and to see the potential despite the problems. So hoping that you'd be interested in finding out more about what the delegation did. There's many videos up online, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jo.
And thanks everyone. I also want to thank Deborah Cook for the really good chairing of a very complicated event. So thanks very much. And I also just want to thank the Faculty for Palestine Network and some allies in the labor movement, particularly QP and CUPW, without whom I wouldn't have been able to go to the social forum. Myself and Yafa the Faculty for Palestine campus SIA delegates. And we fundraised, and the network came forth and provided us the resources that we needed to go there, and it was very important that we be there. And so some people are here that helped with that fundraising and that provided funds, and we really thank you. Others aren't. But it was very crucial that we're there. Two things that we did there was, the first thing we did was a panel that was called Building the Academic Boycott of Israel. And the second thing was a strategy session that was more open to talk about how to coordinate campaigns, etc. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about, just quickly so everyone knows who Faculty for Palestine is. We're a group that formed in 2008. We were a committee of Kaya here in Toronto, and that's where we began. But we built a broader network with other activist faculty members and groups across the country. And so in 5 years, we now have a fairly large network. We have an email list, etc., and we do things. We're activists, so we hold panels, we write statements, we do action things. We need to do more. We're starting to get academic boycott campaigns up and running. But we do have a large network across the country, and there's a lot of other groups organizing or who have even started around the same time as us. For instance, College and University Workers United, or KUWU, of which Aziz is a part. But also a couple of Faculty for Palestine hubs, like Faculty for Palestine Carleton, Faculty for Palestine Alberta. There's a Winnipeg Kaya, there's faculty in Winnipeg Kaya. Wilfrid Laurier, Windsor was involved in doing, organizing around IAW last year. So it is a growing movement, it's up and down. Being activist in faculty is not, it's rare sometimes, but it's also there. People also want to do it. The academy doesn't lend itself to that, but there are spaces for it, and we are building it. So one of the main things that we've been doing is BDS work, so ending Canadian complicity with Israeli apartheid through building the academic boycott movement and working on divestment campaigns with students. Also building around or support of the Palestinian right to education campaigns, and particularly linking our activism to ending education under occupation and apartheid in Palestine. And finally, organizing for freedom of expression and activism on campus, including but not limited to academic freedom, especially around Israeli Apartheid Week and boycott, divestment, and sanctions activism, which, as we know, has been under serious attack on university campuses. So that's who we are, and the question is, why did we go to the World Social Forum? We initially almost didn't, because in the beginning there wasn't really much going on in terms of a coordinated focus on the campuses and academic boycott. But in this past August, PACB, the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, sent out a global call asking artists, students, activists, and academics to participate in the historic World Social Forum. And the idea was to, as they put it, quote, build relations and coordination mechanisms among Palestinian and international academics, artists, and students movements, including academic and cultural boycott campaigns, campus divestments, and twinnings of universities. So for those of us who are engaged in these kinds of campaigns, this call to action from PACB is something that we took very seriously. PACB was launched in Ramallah in April 2004 by Palestinian academics and intellectuals who sought to join the broader international BDS movement and shape it up. So PACB is really the guiding organization for our campaigns and our planning, and it's the hub that kind of knits together the various partners around the world. It establishes and redefines or refines the guidelines that we use to determine what is boycottable in terms of academic boycott, etc. And develops resources and materials, and has an amazing website. In fact, footage from our panel is up on the PACB website at www.pacbi.org if you want to see that. So when Faculty for Palestine got the call, we felt it was crucial to be part of this conversation at the World Social Forum. Particularly because we've been doing all of this organizing around BDS and academic boycott, and because we've specifically and explicitly tried to make transnational links. We know obviously it's a transnational movement, so we have sought out and tried to meet with other faculty organizers and student organizers in different cities and conferences like US ACB, like the New Yorkers Against Cornell Technion, like Brick Up, etc. And we had Salim Valley here a couple of years ago to speak about the University of Johannesburg boycott, those kinds of things. But to be able to try and get everybody together in one place and talk and strategize was a real, something really important that we hadn't had a chance to do. Also, as the PACB call suggested, we are now in a key moment in the consolidation of transnational organizing for BDS on campuses. In the past 3 or 4 years in particular, and especially in the past 2 years, there's been, first of all, sort of a gradual movement, and really now a sort of a surge in academic boycott and campus divestment campaigns. So really this conference, from an academic boycott point of view, really wouldn't even have been imaginable, say, 3 or 4 years ago in the same way that it was today. And I think it was really important that we had both students and faculty on that panel, because our work is now cross-cutting a lot more than it was, and I think that's a real strength. And so to be able to talk together and across those groups is really important. So just to give you a sense of what that last 4 years looks like, you know, prior to 2008, 2009, particularly the Israeli massacre in Gaza, really it was mostly Brick Up, the British group that was the only international partner with PACB. Doing BDS work. But after that, there was a movement, US ACB formed, and they're still going strong. They have like over 1,000 people signed on to the academic boycott campaign. KUU started, we started around that time, the French group Ardeep started, etc. In 2010, we saw the expansion of academic and faculty groups globally with the Indian campaign in CACB and the European platform ePACB. And one of the things that wasn't as great was that neither of those groups was at the World Social Forum, unfortunately, because it would have been really great to build those links. So the next time we really need to make that happen. Also in 2010, SIA, Students Against Israeli Apartheid in Canada, launched the first campus divestment campaign at University of Carleton in Ottawa. By 2011, there were 2 more campaigns launched in Toronto by York and University, Students Against Israeli Apartheid at York and University of Toronto, and also the historic University of Johannesburg academic boycott of Ben Gurion University in the South African boycott of Ben Gurion University in Israel. It was the first, and it is still the only existing academic boycott of an Israeli university, and it's an important one, and it's one that we really need to continue to learn from, etc. And we were very, very lucky to have a South African student speaker, someone from the South African student, I forget the name of the acronym, but who was active in the boycott on our panel, so it was really important. By 2012, there was the launch of an expansion of the New Yorkers Against Cornell Technion partnership, who we're in contact with. U.S. scholars delegation to occupied Palestine. That was a big bit of activism around BDS. And also there's been a real sort of trend in the past year, in 2012, of Students Against Israeli Apartheid on 4 university campuses organizing to get student associations, undergraduate and graduate, to adopt the BDS campaign, endorse the BDS campaign. So in Regina in February, Carleton in March, York University in November, and University of Toronto in December, and this will not end. So anyway, so that's kind of the context in which we were going, and it's really important to be there, and we felt that we needed to be there. I'm just looking at my sketchy notes here. So the groups that were there was PACB. It was PACB that organized the panel. The US ACB, SIA, Faculty for Palestine, Brick Up, and South Africa Students Congress were all on the panel. But there was also Palestinian students from the Palestinian Youth Movement in the audience who actually spoke and engaged in the dialogue, as well as Brazilian students. And so there was a large dialogue that went on both between the panel and the groups there. It would be nice another time to actually get those groups together in a more coordinated way, and in particularly to work more closely with Palestinian students and faculty in a very clear and coordinated way. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading my notes here. Okay, so as PACB recently stated, and as we are increasingly experiencing here on our campuses, the work that we're doing around this is very urgent. So there's an increasing proliferation of Israel studies on campuses and an increased move to normalize links with Israeli campuses or universities on campuses globally, and very much so in Canada. So the Technion University and Tel Aviv University are ones that we're really particularly keeping our eye on here in terms of potential for academic boycott campaigns. So it was really important to be in contact with others who are familiar with what these links are looking like, and to do that kind of comparison work with people with other academics and students, and to start thinking about what it would look like to build an academic boycott campaign and to learn from each other's struggle. One important thing that is really important to mention when we're talking about the academic boycott, first of all, that it's a boycott of Israeli academic institutions, not individuals, and this was very clear. But also that every single Israeli university is boycottable, because every single Israeli university is an apartheid university. And that's a key point, and that was something that came out very clearly in the work that we were doing. And as Rafif Ziada from PACB pointed out when she was on the World Social Forum panel, she said, when you have a country like Israel oppressing the Palestinian people, practicing the worst forms of colonialism, apartheid, and occupation, then the academy plays a central role in propping up that system, supporting that system, and giving services to that system. And then she went on to quote Desmond Tutu, who said, quote, "It can never be business as usual. Israeli universities are an intimate part of the Israeli regime by active choice." And I would say the same thing is true in terms of Canadian universities taking active choices to be part of partnerships with Israeli universities. And so Tutu goes on to say that while Palestinians are not able to access universities and schools, Israeli universities produce the research, technology, arguments, and leaders for maintaining the occupation. And so I'll just wrap up with a couple of comments about what this meant for our work there, which is, first of all, that was very clear. The BDS focus of these panels and this work was very clear, and that is where this work on campus organizing needs to go. So it was nice to be in a room that really just understood that it wasn't a question in terms of questioning that academic boycott was actually what needed to be done, and divestment campaigns. So another observation is that all of us on the panel, in one way or another, really clearly showed that all of our campus movements are subjected to serious, sustained, and well-organized Zionist attacks attempting to silence us. The other part of that is that none of those groups have been silenced. So, in fact, the movement has grown. So, in other words, we're doing our job. We're a major threat. BDS is a major threat to the Zionist organizers and Zionist lobby, and we're able to combat that threat in different ways. So it was actually good to talk to people about the different ways in which that was done, the sort of combating it. Second of all, it was very clear that this attack, the Zionist attack, is a racist attack. And using and learning how to articulate those forms of global and local forms of racism is key to understanding how we're going to articulate our campaigns and make alliances and end it, because it's part of a broader anti-racist project that we all share in. And I think that was very important and a very strong part of our panel to actually have that discussion. I also really felt that in being in that panel that campus campaigns are stronger when they're part of the broader BDS movement. And that was actually one of the things that I felt when I was at the World Social Forum personally, is that I really had, for the first time, a really big sense of what that broad movement looks like of Palestinian solidarity and BDS organizing. Just going to, even being at, say, the rally that was organized by Labor, or connecting, watching the big pink washing flag go up on the stage, as in John's video, talking with students, talking with Palestinian prisoners, etc. All of this activism really came together in that moment, and so the academic boycott is stronger because the academic boycott campaigns are stronger because we're part of that broader movement, and we need to find ways to keep pulling it together and working on our campaigns in that way. And one just concrete thing on that, and I'll end here, or two. One was that the students, in terms of Latin American, making connections with Latin American faculty and students, I personally we didn't make a lot of connections in that way, except with the Brazilian students who are really taking a leading role in the academic boycott work on campus, as in trying to find faculty to help work with them. And so that was really invigorating, but we obviously need to make more connections and do more work on that level, and make those connections better. But on the other hand, we also did make a lot of connections, and when the thing Iliam was talking about around Cup W and the smear campaign around Cup W, when we got back, actually several of us from different parts of the movement actually started writing up a statement, and we have a statement that will be coming out soon when we were able to mobilize those networks and those connections in an active moment of saying, let's challenge this on a global basis. And so when the statement comes out in the next week or so, you'll see it. It has statements from many of the groups and movements that were at the World Social Forum, and it actually was a moment to put into action the kinds of things we say when let's build a campaign or let's act more together. We actually just did it. So thank you.